Hello, and welcome to Overcome a Mental Health Podcast, the place where you can share your mental health stories. I'm very excited for today's guest. We are speaking with Tyler Smith, from the founder of TriumphIt. And without further ado, I'm just going to turn the time over to him. But before that, I do that, I want to thank him for coming on to the podcast.
100%. Appreciate being on, Travis, and getting to spend my time with you and your audience and relaying some of the things that have really benefited my own mental health struggles and overcoming some of that, darker times that a lot of us experience, right? So the biggest thing I think, and the one kind of central theme around my life has really honed around being constantly sweaty, right? So it's always been through sports and through athletics, through competition when I was a lot younger. As weird as it sounds, I grew up in California and I wanted to play ice hockey. That was the main thing I wanted to do. Wanted to play on the LA Kings one day, obviously. So I have that background of athletics through sport. I had an older brother, so we were always pretty competitive growing up as well. Did some wrestling in high school as well. And then I went through junior ice hockey, playing in Boise, Idaho for 2 years before undergrad. Had an injury in that interim, and then got passionate about physical therapy and rehabilitation to get other athletes, to the pinnacle of their genetic limit and that kind of thing as well. So I worked as a physical therapist since 2020. I'm currently in Tacoma, Washington at Camp Murray, working for the Air National Guard as a civilian contractor for the HPO team. So that's the Human Performance Optimization team, as the lead physical therapist with them. So taking care of the guys that have been through the pipeline. So these are guys that have been career military their whole life, a lot of the Air National Guard guys, but chronic knee, chronic back, ankles issues, that kind of stuff as well. So my dad was a firefighter for 38 years. Mom was a nurse. Brother was a physician, sports med doc, and all that. So I'm kind of well versed in the healthcare world. I kind of knew that was the path I was going to chart. And then it really wasn't until I would say 2023 when I'll get into the kind of inciting moment in 2024 through a curiosity driven passion project where I found what I stumbled upon was the TriumphIt challenge and what I'm trying to make, the day job now. And through my passion of helping other people and building community. So we can get to, I guess, that a moment in 2023 if you want, or if you have any other things in the backstory you want to jump into, let me know, Trav.
So let's get to that moment in 2023.
Yeah. So I would say I've always been fairly internally motivated to check the boxes of, progression. I've always been motivated by physical progress and performance, like I said, around the fitness world. And so that kind of culminated in, doing a marathon and then doing an Ironman in 2021, and then led to in 2023 wanting to, pursue a proper hybrid athlete training challenge where I did a 5-minute mile and a 315-pound front squat in the same day. That was the goal. So I've kind of been in that hybrid training where you do lifting, some running, I do some jujitsu as well. So it's kind of multimodality type of training. And then during that 12-week training block, this was the kind of the end of 2023 in October, I wrapped up with that challenge. I got very close to the mile time that I wanted. I did hit the front squat, but I was so demotivated at the end of that training block because of all the work that went into it, that I had a kind of a mental health crisis, in the sense that I just couldn't. I realize now that I was experiencing fitness burnout, essentially, and just kind of going through a low mood associated with trying so hard to reach the pinnacle of something. And that was personal to me, I guess. Might seem arbitrary to most people. It is arbitrary, but it was meaningful to me at the time, and I was investing a lot of effort into doing it. And then when I got that close, and then kind of spiraled slowly after, of not being able to get into the gym and train, it was very aberrant, for me and my disposition to not be wanting to be out in the gym and training and that kind of thing. So I kind of went through the rest of 2023 with pretty low mood, and I realized that there had to be a different way to pursuing the things that I had been doing through the fitness realm. And so in 2024, I kind of retooled, and I thought, what if I, instead of have this hard line, competition with myself, I pursue more of a curiosity driven approach to fitness. And so it started with learning the history behind the federal holidays. So the major holidays, so everything from Martin Luther King Jr. Day through Veterans Day in the United States, doing some research on the history behind the person that created the day of rest, because I work for the military, so I get all the federal holidays off. So the history behind the person that created that legacy, some kind of physical challenge to honor the struggle that they did in their life, and then some type of financial donation to a relevant organization. And so it started with Martin Luther King and doing the backstory with his legacy and his life. And in 1965, he did a Selma to Montgomery, Alabama march, which was 54 miles. He did that over the course of 5 days. And so then I ended up doing the first year in 2024, I did 54 miles in a day. I did 34 of a run, and then I walked the last 20. And then I donated to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which he was the co-president of in his lifetime, as a way to, again, honor something that he would be proud of. And so that had a different spin on how I was taking my fitness. It was no longer necessarily chasing these arbitrary metrics or pursuing a bucket list of physical items to do, like the marathon or Ironman or whatever these things are. Not to say that that's necessarily a wrong thing. It just, at that time in
Hmm.
my life, it wasn't as motivating, I would say. I had to find a new approach. And so I started with the Martin Luther King tribute, and then I went on to the Cesar Chavez. I called it Bringer of the Bells, did some research, and he did an 80-mile march from Delano, California to Sacramento, California, advocating for farm workers' rights, getting bathrooms on the fields, and increasing their living standards. And so I did a 2.8-mile farmer's carry where you're walking with dumbbells with about half my body weight. And then I donated to farmworkerjustice.org. So every challenge was essentially along that progression of a historical narrative tied into the physical legacy of somebody that died and worked very hard to get us a day of rest in 2024 at the time, right? So that's what gave me a little bit more excitement to get out of bed and train for those events. And then I had the idea of then turning that into a project that other people could enjoy with me. So people would buy entry tickets to these events. I could donate half of the proceeds to a relevant organization and then build a community around these challenges year after year. So that's kind of how 2024 wrapped up. And then 2025 was really trying to get the word out about having more in-person events through these seven challenges that I was doing every year. So I would say that has led to a longer lasting pursuit of, I guess, fitness in a new sense, rather than from pure vanity to performance, and then now to purpose is where I'm finding it. And I feel like that's been a good mental health shift, because I know that this is a project that I can pursue for the rest of my life. I want this to be synonymous with things like the Murph workout, honoring Michael P. Murphy, a military veteran who passed away in 2005 in Afghanistan. And across the country, there's thousands of CrossFit gyms that do a specific workout in his honor. I would like TriumphIt to be on that pedestal as well one day. So that's going to be my lifelong project. And I have several kind of different ways. Hopefully I can get that word out through accountability, coaching, and that stuff as well we can talk about. But that's been the main, driver and way to restart kind of that
Hmm.
fitness challenge and pursuing something bigger than myself, I suppose, that got me out of that rut that I was experiencing in 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's like you kind of just had that mindset shift to kind of take a step back and think, "Well, what am I really training for? Why am I doing
Hmm.
this?" And finding that purpose, I think, is the key to like anything when it comes to mental health challenges.
I agree. Yeah, I think there's a lot of quotes I tend to rattle off, but Friedrich Nietzsche was a famous philosopher, German philosopher, and he said, if you have a big enough why, you can get through any how. So despite some of the challenges I do every year seeming pretty daunting to a lot of people, like 54 miles, I now modified it to 54 miles in 54 hours. So roughly 2+ days to do the challenge. But you'd be, really surprised what you can surprise yourself with and what the limit actually is if you have a larger purpose behind it or a community cheering you on to do it, right?
Hmm.
Anything can be really accomplished if you have that sufficient reason to do it, right? Sometimes it's a very kind of crude metric, but if somebody held a gun up to your head and said, run right now, or else I'll abduct your kid or something, I bet you could run 100 miles probably, like just right
So
now, no
yeah,
training.
yeah. My when it comes to my kids, my adrenaline would kick in so quick that I
Yeah.
think I'd be a lot quicker than I would think I was capable of.
Exactly. Like, you hear stories about moms lifting trucks off of their
Mhm,
daughter when they get caught in some kind of accident, and the power of adrenaline and that kind of stuff as well. So I think there's always another fascination with me, and, working in human physiology and human performance. I've always been curious about the limits of the human body, and, reading books like Alex Hutchinson's Endure in 2018. If you look at that book, and why some people are able to push themselves to these limits, and Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins, all these kind of things. Sometimes I could see the negative side of that as well, right? If it's
mhm.
too extreme, but I'm just still fascinated that these things exist, and that the latent potential of humanity is really really wonderful in my estimation. So it's been fun to explore that side of it as well through these challenges.
That's really cool. I'd love for you to take a step back and let's focus on your mental health challenges for a
Hmm.
moment. Like, what, when you were at your lowest, what were you feeling? Like, what were you going through on a daily basis?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think a lot of my mental health is at this point predicated by, time in the gym, and kind of working through different things. And I'd show up better for other people if I'm able to get a workout in and that kind of thing, and take care of myself first, right? As selfish as that may seem, I think it is really appropriate to take care of yourself so you can be a conduit for other people in a better sense. But yeah, I would say in October 2023, again, this is another factor of maybe the time I was living and still living in Washington, right? So we have pretty intense winters in the sense that we have a lot of darkness. That's kind of a big thing, right? Because we're so high up in our latitude. So I wasn't maybe accustomed to that. I grew up in California where I just took the sunshine for full advantage. And, my dad's black, my mom is white. So I need a certain amount of vitamin D that's harder to get in the winter at a higher elevation or climate. So it could have been a factor of that as well, of kind of going from that summer to that winter transition. But oh yeah, it was tough to get out of bed. I would say I've never necessarily been a morning person, but even like basic things, right? Just getting up to even eat. I'm always motivated by food. That's the biggest thing that'll motivate me. But if I'm struggling to get up and eat breakfast, then something's wrong. Because I want to usually am motivated by breakfast and that kind of stuff. So getting to work was a struggle. Like I said, turn the treadmill off or turn the treadmill on, take my warm up 5 minutes in and I just turn it off. Like I don't have it today. There's just no point, because everything I was doing was like a rate of perceived exertion, RPE, like 9 out of 10 or something. So every workout was just very on the edge for me to hit that goal or attempt to hit that goal at the time. So I realized that kind of out of that process too, is that I became a big fan of consistency. So I realized that consistency always trumps intensity. There's always a time for intensity, but if you haven't built the consistency yet, then there's no point in just jumping onto the wagon of intensity, because it's not going to last. And so things like that would fluctuate. I've always maybe had issues with potentially body dysmorphia, and that's another big thing in the fitness world, and probably from wrestling, I think, from high school, right? So you have to make weight for certain divisions and weight classes and that kind of stuff. So kind of crazy that we subject high schoolers to that. But I was gaining weight for ice hockey and losing weight for wrestling. And you kind of go through these binge, and I wasn't purging or anything like that, but I would definitely binge and that kind of thing after making weight for something. And so I do have some of those habits that can, rear their head, and kind of take me down a whole mental health spiral, something that I still obviously struggle with, because I do some jujitsu now, and that's a kind of a weight sport as well. There's weight classes in jujitsu. So that's something I have to kind of watch out for, and be mindful of. But I would say the shift to more of a purpose driven approach through TriumphIt rather than strictly performance has helped me with, body dysmorphia issues, and kind of nitpicking or critiquing your own self image and that kind of thing, which is very common as a fitness coach and physical therapist, because you want to live up to that standard of what your patients see. And
Mhm,
so your body is your business, essentially, right? That's your
mhm.
that's your business card, is what you look like in this industry. So for better or worse, it makes me live up to a certain standard, and I hold high standards. So you got to kind of watch for the downside of that, and the bad behaviors that can spiral out of control because of it. But yeah, I would say in 2023 is when it got kind of at its worst, because right after that um, challenge was wrapping up, and it was like October 1st, essentially. I was when I was doing the squat and the mile goal, and I was trying to get to about 184 body weight to help facilitate the run, and then got to about 188 on the actual day. So didn't quite hit the body weight goal, but it didn't matter because I hit the squat and all that. But then right after that, I went back to California for a wedding, a family wedding, and then I kind of spiraled again too with the way with the out of control eating behavior too. So then when I got back from the wedding and all that, I was like, there's no way I can get back to the type of training that I would need to hit this goal. So I kind of just gave the goal up essentially at that point, and kind of walked away from even attempting to do it at that point. But that was some of the stuff I was spiraling with in 2023 was, I would say, yeah, the food addiction, the body image, and then just overall fitness burnout of trying to hit this goal. And then that kind of wrapping into the beginning of the winter in Washington it was just too much to handle. So it really wasn't until 2024 in January, maybe, where I started having a little bit more of the curiosity mindset, which helped shift some of that like 2-3 month period of, really intense dark moments. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I always wondered. So I have nephews that wrestle.
Hmm.
One of them just got out of high school. He's wrestled a little bit for junior college.
Okay.
But I always wondered, like, that mental mindset of having to make weight and that type of stuff. Like, does it have quite an effect on the mental health of teenage kids in high school? Would you
I,
say?
I would say so. I would say so. I think any sport where that's, a big issue, I feel like gymnastics probably has another big, issue with that, or it's very, everything's on display, so to speak. I mean, in high school wrestling, you're wearing singlets, right? So you're wearing
Hmm.
essentially a bodysuit, and it's just the most awkward sport ever for a 14-year-old kid to go through. And then you're going to stand in your boxers on a scale in front of a bunch of strangers and judges and try to make the weight and all that. And then you're all fatigued for the matches, and then you lose, and then you feel sad because you lost because you had no energy because you cut weight, and then you gain weight after. And I think they do some hydration testing now, fortunately, so it's not maybe as difficult as it used to
Yeah.
be back in 2007 to 10 when I was kind of in high school. But I would be very curious to see the rate of, mental health disorders, or, especially body image issues in the wrestling community. I think that would be a very fascinating study, and I would
Yeah.
imagine it's got to be higher than, the baseline
Yeah.
gen pop. Yeah.
I totally agree. I think we put a lot of pressure on these high school age kids
Yeah.
to perform and do well.
Right. That's true.
Obviously, fitness played a huge role in kind of changing your mindset and getting over your low slump there.
Hmm.
How did your inner world start to change when your fitness journey became about more than yourself?
100%. I think that's been the biggest thing too, is I've been noticing in 2025 as I'm trying to get more of the word out about what the TriumphIt challenge is and all these kind of things. You have to take on a new mindset, right? I would say I'm more of an ambivert now, where I can kind of do the extroversion thing as much as I can at certain increments. But I'm naturally an introvert, right? If I could be home with a book, I'd be most at home. But starting a business, starting down the entrepreneurial journey, you have to get out of the home and really display what the passion you have for this company is, and why it matters, and why other people might benefit from it. So that's pushed me in a lot of ways to get out of my comfort zone there. And I'd say the biggest thing I've done in 2025 has been, in late 2024, has been to think of a more fitness and community aspect to the whole journey that I'm on right now. So it's joining more running clubs, and I joined two different running clubs, Tacoma Runners and Tacoma Run Club, where you meet at a coffee shop or you meet at a bar and you go do a 5K together, and then you have some fellowship after, essentially. And another group that I joined in January of this year is called F3. So fitness, faith, and fellowship. It's been around for about 15 years. Different groups all across the country. It started in, I think, South Carolina in 2011. And their whole purpose is to invigorate small groups of male community leaders, and through the pursuit and through the discipline of fitness. So they meet up at local parks It's free for all men. You meet up and you work out for an hour. You can go have fellowship coffee or, breakfast after as well if you want. And it's about living for something bigger than yourself as well. So the F movement is very aligned with kind of what I want TriumphIt to be as well. So I would say late 2024, early 2025, and so on, I've really had a shift of the individualistic fitness pursuits to more the communal and larger, aspect of bringing others along the journey with me and kind of listening to their stories and how I could best, benefit them. So I've been doing a bi-monthly free training camps in the Tacoma area. So at Wright Park, I'll meet and we'll train for the next challenge together because a lot of times it's very intimidating. If you look at the TriumphIt Challenge calendar of events and you see, oh, we're going to do the Murph workout in May and the Memorial Day Murph. So that's 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 squats, and it's a mile run on each of, the beginning and end of it. So obviously to a lot of individuals, that's very intimidating. So I do these free training camps to kind of teach people maybe how to get their first pull-up, whether it's through a resistance band or just teaching them how to do a negative or even a grip hold, that kind of thing as well. So I'm trying to instill, again, more of that idea of bringing other people along with me so that when I'm gone, when I'm in my casket, there'll be something to show for my life. It's not just going to be simply that I lived and I tried to pursue my 5 minute mile attempt. And look at Tyler. He was so fast. Isn't that amazing? Right. But there's probably going to be my mom and my brother and my dad at my funeral. And that's it. Like no one else is going to care if that's what my life ended up being. So I would rather like to build a legacy of the pillar of fitness in the community. So he really helped build other people up towards their goals and really gave them essentially the spotlight towards what they were trying to pursue as well. So that bi-week or bi-monthly training camp, I call it TriumphIt and Chill. So that's kind of the fun marketing I have for it. So I just had one 2 days ago on Sunday or yesterday. Today's Monday. Yeah, yesterday is our last event. And the thing I do for that as well is you have to bring some kind of nostalgic era snack and drink combo. And then
Awesome.
I have like a get to know you card game. It's called what's it called? Like Be Yourself or something. It's one of those like, they have different categories like random and would you rather and deep and all these kind of things. So I draw a card and then somebody has to, share some relevant thing about their history. And so it's a way to build up, kind of facilitate people getting out of their shell and doing something hard together and then having fun and having a snack and drink and just kind of hanging out at the park as well. So I want to see that grow as well. I've been really inspired by this guy EJ O'Donnell at Tacoma Run Club out here. He's been building it for about 7 years, but he's about 100 people that show up every Sunday and do the run down Ruston Way. So I really want to see TriumphIt become something like that in the community in the area here. And I think if I could just give that consistently, it's really about the consistency of showing up, no matter if there's one person there or there's 5 or there's 10 or there's 200, right? Just show up, teach that person something, help them, have them be seen in some way, and then improve the lives of other people to get them towards where they want to be. So that's been a fun way to think and to give back is through those training camps, and I really hope those grow. But the biggest word I would use to describe my fitness journey now is community driven and purpose driven rather than more individualistic where it had been and where I got into trouble, in late 2023 of just focusing on myself and working out, 2 hours of lifting in the morning, 2 hours of running in the evening, and it was 4 hours a day. And, fortunately, I didn't have a wife and kids or any of that at the time. So I wasn't really neglecting those relationships, but there's so much I could have been doing with that time instead of just pursuing my own endeavors. So that's the word I would use to describe is just the community aspect of getting out of my comfort zone and bringing other people along with me currently.
That's really cool. And I love that you talked about building a legacy that will
Mm,
outlive you. I think that's
right.
really cool as well. And it's amazing what those kind of icebreaker things can do and building those relationships. So I think that's important for that community that you were just describing as well.
I think it's so fun. I think it's so fun. I used to have a podcast called Tyler Talks to Strangers, and I would do questions very similar to what that is, where I would walk up to people at the park or at the beach in Santa Monica, and I would just say, "Hey, I'm starting this podcast, Tyler Talks to Strangers. It's 10-minute conversation with random people that I meet. Would you rather, deep questions, all these kind of things. And would you talk to me, right? And it's amazing what people will say to you, right? People that you just met 2 minutes, prior, they'll say what their biggest fear is, their biggest regret, what they wish they would have said to their brother before their brother passed away. And it's like they're in tears in the first 2 minutes of meeting you. And it's just really incredible. So I've always kind of been chasing that sensation, because I kind of put that project down at a certain point, and during COVID, I think, and I regret it in some ways, but I think there's always a part of that inside of me that's curiosity, and curiosity driven about other people and their stories. I think everybody's got some interesting thing about themselves that they could teach me. Everyone spends their time doing something on this planet. And even if you spend 8 hours watching Netflix every day, you probably know all the good shows to watch, and you could save me time, and I wouldn't have to watch all the bad ones because they've seen all the good, so everybody's good at something and they could teach you something. I really firmly believe that. So it's been a fun way to facilitate kind of getting past the shallow, superficial conversations that we so often have, the small talk. It gets kind of a bad rap for good or bad, but I really am interested in having those deep conversations with my friends and family, and kind of, that's why I love road trips so much, because there's nowhere to go. You're just in the car, you're looking ahead, you're going towards the destination, and you can have these kind of deeper conversations. So that's why I like being a guest on podcasts, because you make me think in different ways that I've never thought about before. This isn't pre-recorded or whatever. This
Yeah.
isn't you didn't tell me any of the questions beforehand,
Mm.
so it's a good way to practice my own kind of flow state, and that's why I appreciate the things that you're doing, of course, and then the highlight on overcoming mental health. I think is just incrementally more and more important as we become more siloed and lonely through technology in a lot of ways. So I am fascinated by where this whole thing is going as a species, and in the next
Hmm.
5-10 years. I mean, by the time your kids are grown and in college, I mean, I don't know if college is going to exist and what's going to happen. So we're all going to have to figure this out on the fly. So I really
Yeah, we're
appreciate what you're doing, Travis.
we're on. Oh, thank you. We're on the same page there, though. Like I don't know what the future holds
Yeah.
at all.
100%. Every day it's changing so fast. Yeah.
It's almost kind of nerve wracking.
Yeah.
It just keeps my anxiety up, I guess.
I think the way I combat that is, I think, like you said, if I can just build authentic connections with real humans, then there's always going to be a place for me. If
Hmm.
you add value to every room that you're in, because you're either just a good person, people are going to want to have you on their team. If you lose your job, tomorrow, and then you're known as that guy that's just been a good connector of people, and people really value your input, and that kind of thing, then they're going to want you, they're going to hire you for something. They'll say, just come to my company and do whatever, right? Just be around, right? So I feel like we can really take care of each other if we're just having that mindset of really caring about each other and having good human connections and not being as superficial. So I'm hoping that as long as I have that as a good mental frame of like, just listen to people, be a good human, it's going to work out for you in the end, because those people tend to go farther than the people that are really trying to drag others down and have that
Yeah,
constant dog eat dog mentality, right? So
yeah. That's a good thing to have, is to be able to build connections
mhm,
and really build those relationships. I am actually quite surprised that you got people while you were walking around and asking questions to strangers. You got so many people just to open up about personal things like that.
100%. You should try it. It's incredible. Yeah. And I had a microphone. Can you imagine? Yeah. So I walk up to somebody. It was hard to get people in my dad's generation, baby boomers, because they're a little bit more skeptical of technology, and, where's this going to be uploaded to the cloud, and what's the cloud? And, are you going to hack my data? That kind of stuff. So you got to give those people a little bit more leeway. But most people, definitely millennials and Gen Z and all that, like, they were super open about that. And it wasn't visual, it was just audio recorded
Hmm.
for a while, so it was a little bit less intrusive. But you would be astonished at some of the things people will say and just open up, because they've wanted to say these things forever, and they haven't had a chance, or they don't have, sadly, the friend group to do it and that listen to them, or the family and all that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of that is actually getting outsourced to things like ChatGPT now, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but a lot of people are using it like a therapist as well, because it is very it'll fake sympathy and empathy in a lot of ways too. So that's interesting. I've used it for processing certain things in my own life too with ChatGPT. So I'm a big fan. I think obviously the in-person connection is the most important, but sometimes even just having the buddy in the pocket, it can make a big
Yeah.
difference too. So that's
Yeah.
something
Just
I've
that
noticed.
one like motivational quote for the day can
Mm,
take you far.
yeah. What kind of quotes do you tend to live by? I know this is your show, but is there anything
You
that you have
know,
off the top of your head that you enjoy?
not off the top of my head. I dive into so many quotes that I can't
Mm-hmm.
even
Yeah.
can't even think of any off the top of my head. I mean, I can kind of go into a few things that kind of motivate me to keep going.
Okay. Yeah.
Some of the things are, I think it kind of goes in with what you were saying is build a community.
Yeah.
Have a have a few people in your life that you can trust, whether you need to, you know, at times maybe you just need somebody to listen to you and your what you're going through. And other times you may need that person to give you advice.
Yeah.
But I think it's about building, that tight relationship with a few people and full on trusting them. And but you also need to trust yourself. So I've been learning to do that one more myself.
That's a good one. How do you learn to trust yourself more? Is there something specifically you do to
Um, you know, for me, the past year, a lot of my I had a I've been struggling with mental health like crisis kind of for a while now due to some medical issues that I had.
Yeah.
So I've struggled for years with depression and anxiety, and it took me years to really admit that I had a problem. And so this last year, how I started building trust in myself is I just learned how to love myself.
Damn. Okay. That's
And
huge. Yeah.
yeah, it's a big step. I think first comes to admitting that you have a problem and getting the help, whether it be
Mhm.
therapy or medication, whatever it is you need. But really being able to look in the mirror each day and be like, you know what? You're not a bad guy after all.
Yeah. 100%. That's the tough one for me is yeah, I'm just kind of pretty anti-medication because I want to do everything, holistically, naturally, and through fitness or whatever it is, through vitamin D and supplementing with that, or looking at my diet and all those kind of things. So I'm the worst with that because like there's probably times literally I should if I just was on like an SSRI, I probably would feel better to feel
Yeah.
better. But I'm just like that's like against my like foundational
No,
philosophy. I don't know. Yeah.
no, I get it. I get it. Because I think the medication isn't for everyone.
Hmm.
I've used it a couple times to get through like some of my really, really rough patches.
Yeah. Right.
But right now, I do take a more holistic approach.
Okay.
Take quite a bit of like supplements and
Yeah.
um because I don't always like the side effects of medication.
Right, right.
Like if you need it, like go for it. If you can handle
That
all that,
makes
go
sense.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there was just a meta-analysis I heard about types of exercise that were best for mental health, and it turns out dance therapy was actually number 1. So, I think that's super interesting because in 2025, as a separate challenge, I guess, not related to fitness, but I wanted to get off all the dating apps. That was, like, the big thing for me, right? Because it was very passive and it didn't seem like the manly thing to do is like, that this is how I'm gonna find my wife. Not if you have found love through a dating app, if you're listening to this, that's great. But it hadn't really worked for me. It was just kind of warping my perception of people and looking more for checklists than for actually humans, right? So I was like, I'm just gonna go out to these different places, join different clubs and groups and try to shoot my shot in real life. So I started going to a country line dancing bar every week, basically on Saturdays. And so I actually experienced great joy just from learning how to dance. I'm not great at by any means, but learning how to at least attempting line dancing and as an adult. So that's been really fun too. And so I could see how that would be, make it into the data as one of the more significant ways to improve your mental health is because you're doing something physical. You're learning a new skill. So you feel like you're progressing in something you're doing with other people that are also, struggling maybe as hard as you. So there's the communal aspect of it. And then, like I said, you're kind of stacking all these things on top of each other. And so dance therapy, that might be one to think about.
That's crazy. I would have never thought that would be up on top of the list.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. 100%.
So like somebody that's like struggling from whether it be mental health issue, burnout from their fitness goals,
Hmm.
what do you tell that person? What, in your mind, what's the first step they need to take to get help?
I would say plug in. Don't be afraid. Do not be afraid to plug into your community in absolutely any way that you can. Because when you isolate yourself even further from the issue, everything spirals harder when you don't have anybody else to talk to, or like you said, those kind of like 4 a.m. friends, the people you can call in the middle of the night and really get help from. So the biggest thing that's really dragged me out of that kind of dark place, like I said, has always been plugging into my community, doing something physical with other people, specifically finding a new club, some new skill you can learn potentially. But it's really about getting out of your own house, because I live alone, and I could, like I said, I'm more introverted. I could just be with a book and be, fairly content most of my time. But I'm probably not progressing in a lot of ways if I just, isolate myself like that. And adding, I'm not adding the randomness to my life that I would need to have these interactions with people and maybe meet somebody that will become my new best friend, or somebody that I could potentially date. Right. So I just find you bump in and add, there's four different types of luck that I've heard. And one of them is basically just like you can have some control over it because you just put yourself in opportunities to be lucky. If you go to more networking events, then you might run into somebody that's got a really good business idea for you, or whatever it is. So you really just, you have to learn how to kind of embrace putting yourself out there, embrace rejection, talk to that person. But it's really about stepping outside of your own four walls, getting outside of your own head as best you can, because that's the hardest part. We're all permanently trapped in our own brains, and we have to kind of walk around with that all the time. So you better learn, like you said, how to love yourself, because you're the only person that you're guaranteed to be with yourself for the rest of your life, right? So you got to learn how to love yourself. But I would say the biggest thing, if somebody's really struggling, is you got to get outside. You got to get into the real world, because if you're just on, these Twitter forums and Reddit forums, that's not real life. There's people that will comment the meanest things ever. If you're getting cyberbullied or something, you got to go to the grocery store and talk to, the person checking your groceries out, because they're going to actually have a real conversation with you if you're willing to do that, right? And just looking people in the eye and, taking genuine interest in what their struggle is. And that's the biggest thing I think for me, is just realizing that there's a wider world than your own four walls if you're really struggling, and people will be willing to open up and help you out if you make that first vulnerable admission that you're not doing so well. And so we're all on these kind of, roller coasters, and the downside of having, my own business at this point, and all that, is I have to be on the online world, and I have to have a network, and I have to do the social media game and play the algorithm and all these things. And the detriment of maybe some authenticity, right? So it's, if you looked at just my Instagram, TriumphIt Challenge, it'd be like, oh, this guy's just crushing it every day with his goals. He's hitting all these things, right? But I don't always post the days I'm not, having the best day, right? And it's, maybe I should do that more, or I should have a segment on my, Instagram where I do that, because some people do that, but then it becomes, then it's almost like the vulnerability porn, where like they're just trying to get clicks because they're being so vulnerable. So I don't want to go that way either, where it's
Yeah.
like they're just divulging everything that's TMI, that like you don't really go onto Instagram to hear the sob story of some random stranger, So there's a fine line that I don't know how to walk necessarily. But I would say, yeah, the online world is not real life, because if you just looked at my Instagram, you'd think I've perfected the art of living, and I really haven't. And I'm stumbling in the dark like everybody else. And if you just realize that everybody's in that same boat as you, then I think that'll, in a weird way, pick your own mental state up, because we know nobody has this life figured out 100%.
Yeah, very true. And I love that answer. And you never know, by opening up to somebody, like maybe they are feeling the same way. And by you
Yeah,
saying something and being upfront,
yeah.
it's going to allow them to share their story as well.
Yes, you need that dialogue. Yeah, how can I help you? How can you got to hear it. But if you're not willing to open up, and you keep it all inside, then that's when people, right, suffer in silence. That's the biggest thing, right? They say is, so opening up, stepping outside of your four walls, getting into the real world, getting some fresh air, talk to somebody that's, the barista at Starbucks, do something where you're seeing the humanity in other people, and it'll reinstill some of your own faith in yourself, I think.
While we're on the mental health topic, I like to ask this question just to hear the responses that I get. And I know it's very generic.
Hmm.
So, what do you feel is the biggest stigma to mental health?
I think I think men have a kind of a unique one just because we're kind of told we're not allowed to have the emotional side of our being. You know, we're not supposed to cry. We're not supposed to all these things and display weakness of any kind. So I think that's a big stigma that, specifically the male psyche is walking around with at all times is that, we're supposed to be the protectors and providers and, all these kind of things for our communities. And it doesn't leave much room for vulnerability. So that's a tough one because I'm not a big crier myself, but I feel like I wish I had a little bit more, command of that area of my life as well, where I could express that a little bit more, but it's something that our society doesn't really, hold space for in a lot of ways. So that would be the stigma that I wish we can kind of get past. And I don't know what that would look like necessarily, but that's a tough one. Yeah, that's a great question, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's one of the ones I've always come back to. Thought my idea of getting past it is just continue sharing our stories.
I have one.
Go ahead.
I have one. Something I've been doing better actually lately to kind of combat this like men aren't allowed to have emotions thing is like I will tell my good friends, my good male friends, I love you. I will say that in a text. My favorite thing is audio messages. So instead of like a because calling is kind of sketch for millennials because you don't want to like catch people at the wrong time. But I want people to hear my voice because then it's more of a personal thing. But I will leave a lot of audio message on, people's phones and all that kind of stuff and just be like, hey man, dude, I love you, Darnell. Like you're one of my best friends. I appreciate wrestling with you and like all these things we get to do and hang out and that kind of thing. So I think like normalizing straight men saying I love you to other men would be really cool. I think that's a really healthy way to kind of like, why can't we say that? Like, I don't
Yeah,
know. I'm trying to be better at that. And I am actually getting legitimately better at that. And, not holding back as much because yeah, I have love for so many people in my life. And I think they need to hear that too. Oftentimes they never hear it because if they don't have maybe a significant other, nobody tells them that, that they love them maybe. So I think normalizing male loving friendships or just vocalizing that and it's not a weird thing. I think that would be a cool way to combat. That's what I want to see in the world. Thinking about that.
that's really cool. I'm trying to think now if I've ever done that. And I think as I've got older, I've done it a little bit just because it's
Hmm.
like, get older, all my friends are, I'm from Utah, all my friends are in either different states or different stages of life.
Okay.
I think the last few phone calls I've had with some of these close friends, we've ended with that because it's like, like
Yeah.
I may not talk to you for 6 or 7 months because we're
Right.
all so busy and in different places. So, and I think it's important for people to know.
I think so. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that you wish you would have told them when they if they did pass away randomly. It's like, well, this is the last thing I said to my buddy that I loved him, or that some stupid joke because I wanted to protect my fragile ego. So it's like, no, you should probably just say the actual thing, right? Especially with your family. Like parents and all that kind of stuff. My dad had a kind of fraught relationship with his dad for a while because he was a very old school dad. My grandfather on my father's side, he wanted my dad to be a doctor, his sister be a lawyer, and so when my dad kind of stepped away from specifically medicine, he went to I ended up going to paramedic school, so he essentially did a lot of it, but he had kind of a riff with his dad for a long time. So I think healing those divisions and while people are still alive, I think is the most important thing. So really reaching out and having that mindset of like, if this is the last conversation I have with this person on the phone, because if you don't see your friend, more than twice a year or something like that, then you might as well say those things that are the most impactful now. So I agree with
Yeah.
that.
And that's a good way to put it. And it's like if you know that that conversation or you're not going to be able to see them, it's like it's a good
Hmm.
thing to do because it's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah.
It, and most likely, if they're your good friend, they're not going to laugh at you or think any differently of you. They probably think the same way. They just don't dare to say.
Yes, they're just too afraid to say it. So I
Well,
think the bigger sign of strength is your willingness to say that thing and to be vulnerable and to do that. So we shouldn't take it as the opposite. We should actually take it as a great sign of strength and respect to be able to say that in our male relationships or really with anybody.
yeah, and I can attest that being vulnerable is hard.
Hmm. It's a pattern. We get better at it with practice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree. I remember I know this is more your story, but I just want to
Sure.
elaborate on that. Is
Do it.
my very first podcast, it was me telling my own story.
Okay.
And I remember those moments, like talking to my wife before I actually recorded the podcast. I'm like, I don't know how to be that vulnerable. I don't know how to do it. Like, what do I do? And she said, just sit in front of the camera and don't care.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I did, whether it's
Right.
good or not. Like, and I think, like you said, over time, is a lot easier than it was before. 'Cause
Hmm.
now I'm just like, an open book. You ask me a question, and I'm going to answer it as honestly as I can.
Yeah, life gets easier when you can have that mindset of like, I don't even care at this point. Yeah, what you think about me because that's who I am. You're gonna
Hmm.
polarize some people, and you're gonna have the best of friends if you're able to be that honest. Because if you go through life honestly, where everybody has this kind of fake image of you, or if everybody likes you, then nobody really likes you. I feel like you kind of should have a little bit more of a polarizing edge to your persona where you're going to really find your best friends quickly because you're going to have a lot of personality, and that's a great thing,
Yeah,
rather than
I,
faking it to everybody.
I
Yeah.
agree. And we shouldn't, another thing to add on to that is we shouldn't live our lives for other people.
Hmm. I feel that. I feel like I've been. It's not to my parents' detriment in any sense because they gave me absolute freedom with everything I've wanted to do. And but like I said, I grew up in a very like healthcare dominant house. Paramedic, nurse, sports med doc, athletic trainer, sister. So I feel like I kind of pursued healthcare because it was like, again, like I wanted to make my parents happy of like, see, I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I did that. I went as far as I could in my career path. And I've liked, like a lot of my journey of through physical therapy. But when I've found this now thing that I love even more through TriumphIt, I really kind of think this is really what I've been put on the planet to do. And like I said, this is the lifelong mission. I don't care how long it takes. If I could obviously make this cover my you know life costs and everything, that's obviously the goal. But I don't have to become a millionaire from this project. I just really want to get the word out about helping other people find a space in the fitness world that's not just egocentric and about checking boxes of hitting certain times that doesn't mean anything ultimately, but about building around a bigger community and honoring our history of people that have died to give us the right for days of rest in the US. So that's really what Triumph
Yeah,
is about.
that's really cool. And you actually made a good like segue into my next question.
Yeah.
What core values or principles guide the TriumphFit movement?
Yes. Big core values. I would say it's not mandatory to do this in TriumphIt, but I am a big proponent of what is it? Consistently good is better than occasionally great. So that mindset of like showing up every day, putting in the work. It is great to do one hard thing, I think, every single day. So I've personally done that through a sprint hit challenge, so high intensity interval training challenge of doing, it's a 5 minute workout, but it could be any modality I want, but it's a 20-second max effort followed by a 2 minute rest. And you do that 3 times. So that's the one hard thing I tend to do every single day. Again, if you're in the TriumphIt world, you do the challenges, you don't have to do a sprint every single day. But I would say a big pillar of TriumphIt, in my estimation, is that we kind of push each other to do one hard thing a day. We have that kind of consistently good is better than occasionally great. Consistency trumps intensity mindset. We have a big respect for history. And so the legacy of the United States, everything from Martin Luther King, Cesar Chavez, Underground Railroad, Harriet Tubman, September 11th, 9/11 Tower, like all these different challenges have a tie in historically. So history is a big part. Physicality, like I said, philanthropy is a big part as well, because I donate 50% of my profits to these relevant organizations. And then everything else that I make through training plans or through the accountability group, 10% of the profits are going to go to givedirectly.org, who's helping to combat extreme poverty and across the country or across the world, really. So givedirectly.org is a big kind of wing of TriumphIt as well. So philanthropy, history, physicality, community. They're like the main pillars, I would say, of TriumphIt and what this whole thing is. Because I think it was 2019, I saw the TED Talk from Peter Singer. He's a Australian, I want to say, philosopher. about the life you can save and how, you can choose to buy the latest Nike shoes and then, spend $150, or you can donate $150 to, the third world, poverty support in Africa, and you could buy 2 malaria nets, and maybe you just saved a kid from dying because you bought a malaria net. So he's a very extreme in that case, but like he thinks it's kind of the effective altruistic movement of like, what's the maximum amount you can do with every dollar that you spend, right? And so he's kind of had these thought experiments about why it's beneficial to give 10% of your profit or your whatever, your income, your paycheck away to these organizations and have a meaningful impact. And so that's been a big factor in my life. I think that I would like to be generous in that sense, because if you the quote is, if you can't give 10 cents out of a dollar, you're not going to give, $1,000 out of $10,000, right? When you hit that pinnacle of like, oh, I'll be generous when I'm a millionaire. If you weren't generous when you didn't have as much money, you're not all of a sudden gonna become
Yeah.
generous when you're like, you say that, but you're not,
Yeah, you're not going to change.
you're not gonna, it's a disposition, right? So I want to, even through this journey of, trying to make TriumphIt, pay my bills and all these kind of things, I want to maintain that transparency. That's another big pillar too, is transparency. So after every challenge, I'll say exactly, I sold these many entry tickets to this challenge, after taxes, after this, after XYZ, this is what I donated, this is what you helped do in the world, right? So like, I wish more businesses were very transparent with their finances. I think that's just a big issue as well. Like, I
Mhm.
don't care. I'm going to tell you exactly how much money I made from each of these things. And I'm going to tell you how much I donated. Because I think that's another, I have a segment on my Instagram, like about, it's Mission Monday. So kind of things that, maybe phrases that I think society has backwards. I call it dumb shit that society says. And so one of them is that, virtue signaling is bad and we shouldn't do that. It's like, what should we vice signal? Should we be doing the opposite? It's like, if you're doing good things in the world, you should project that into the world so other
Yeah.
people can follow along and donate or be excited about what that is as well. So I do tend to tell people where my money is being donated to, and I don't think that's a bad thing to do, to spread, that on my Instagram of like, look how generous I'm being. Maybe you should be generous too. Like, let's all be generous. So I try to be very transparent with all those donations, because I take the people that sign up for my events, I take that very seriously. They're trusting me with their money and I tell them I'm going to do something. So I want to
Mhm.
do something. So transparency, history, physicality, community. I guess I have a lot of pillars of what TriumphIt is. I keep having more, but I should probably narrow it down. There's a good quote from Tom Bilyeu and his kind of business mantra, and his mindset is like, you always have to think, what do you do and who do you do it for? That is your business. What do you do and who do you do it for? And so if I had to summarize Triumph, it is, I create historical community fitness challenges for people that struggle to do hard things alone and they need a group to do them with. So that's kind of how I boil Triumph It down in a lot of ways, is what I do and who do I do it for. I do it for everybody that wants to pursue hard things but needs that support of other people to do it and wants to give back and have more of a legacy to their physicality. And that's what I really want to spread into the world with this project of TriumphIt.
I love it. Love every bit of it, and I love that you have such a, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of just an idea of like where you want everything to go and
Yeah.
where everything is at, and it's great.
I do have all that written down. It's on the Instagram as well, TriumphIt_challenge. And I have my exact goals for what I want this to be and how many I want to have, 100,000 people do a TriumphIt challenge. I want to have $1 million donated to givedirectly.org in my lifetime. All these things. And there's an absolute diabolical idea I have to accomplish this that would put a lot of eyes on what I'm doing through a bear crawl challenge, essentially a bear crawl across America. I'd be the first person to do that. So that's a whole separate thing if you want to break into that. But I do have all these written out on the Instagram as well. So you can see exactly where I'm shooting for. Like, this is a successful life. This is like the pinnacle of success. If I could do all of those things, have a major brand sponsor a challenge like Strava or Nike. If I could, like I said, 100,000 people do a challenge, million donated, all these kind of things, certain revenue, monthly and yearly, that kind of thing as well. So I think it's good to write those down, because then it gives you clarity of like, where do I see this thing going in 5 years and 10 years and everything on my deathbed? On my deathbed, who's going to be there? What are they going to say about who Tyler was? Like, what lit this guy up? Why did he get out of bed every day? And it wasn't just to get a 5 minute mile. It was to bring people along, along this whole journey. So that's really why, I do what I do and where the passion comes from. And I think it's given me so much vital energy in life. And that's how you know you're on the right track. I think if anyone out there listening is struggling to find what that is, if you can do something and it just consumes your time, but it seems like that time just vanished and you don't know where it went, that's probably a good sign that you're on the right track, because there was times where I was building out TriumphIt and the platform and the website and the newsletter and all these things, and I had forgotten to work out. And I was like, I always work out. I actually look forward to doing that. So if I'm missing workouts for 1 or 2 days because I'm so busy building the platform of what TriumphIt is, then I know that this is very meaningful to me, right? So that's just a whole, another thing is like where your energy's going and where your passion is, like you're gonna really have that well. It's like an endless spring of energy to do this thing, because you need to get this thing into the world. And like the biggest tragedy would be if I got hit by a bus walking outside after this podcast, because like there's so much. I've done 0.1% of what I want TriumphIt to be, and it's not it's not all written down, so people can't just necessarily like do all the things that I have planned. I should write these all down, right? But that would be the biggest tragedy, is like I can't die soon because I want to do all of these things for TriumphIt before I die. Like I can die peacefully in 20 years if I get all these, missions accomplished. But if I died in the next 5 years, I would be so sad because of the question marks of the things that TriumphIt could have become, essentially. So that
Yeah.
would be the hardest thing.
Yeah. And I really love how passionate you are about this project too.
Yeah.
So what does the 5-year roadmap look like for Triumph?
Yeah.
Triumphit, yeah.
Yeah, it is a
Get
hard
tongue
one.
tied now.
TriumphIt Fitness, or yes, TriumphIt Fitness Challenge is the full way to say it, but TriumphIt is the moniker. But in 5 years, what would that put me at? 2030. So honestly, if I do, if it's written out the way and it goes the way I can, then to get really this whole thing on the map and in a really, really big sense, like I said, I think either 2027, it would be the earliest I could do it, or 2028 would be the bear crawl across America. So this would be the first human to do this. This is a diabolically stupid idea, but also the most awesome idea. And it's a thought virus that I can't get out of my head. So it would be starting where I grew up in Los Angeles, in Santa Monica Beach, California, and bear crawling. Essentially, it'd be like in maybe 3 2-hour chunks. So like 6 hours a day of bear crawling. So hands and knees, reciprocal crawling, not on your knees, sorry, hands and feet, but like crawling like a bear.
Mhm.
You can Google that. I'm sure everyone knows what that is. Doing that for about 6 hours a day. If I covered about 5 miles every single day, it would take me roughly 550 days or 560 days, I want to say. And so if I started January 1st, let's say 2027, I would finish, the goal would be to finish around 4th of July, 2028. I would be in Times Square, New York, and I would be finished the bear crawl across America. I would like to do some of it with my father. He's retired. And so the way that I bonded with my dad when he retired in 2011 was we'd go for these long walks, 2 hour long walks, and talk about everything about his childhood. And you learn how to appreciate somebody's mindset and understand their history, everything, when you take the time to, I think, walk or do something physical with somebody. So I would love to start the challenge in Santa Monica with my dad, and then finish 2028, 4th of July, around that, and then fly back to LA, because then the LA has the 2028 Olympic Summer Games in Los Angeles in late July 2028. So that would be really cool. But basically, it'd be a way to get eyes on what TriumphIt is, right? This crazy idea. As another thing on my YouTube channel, TriumphIt Challenge, I do a fitness history story. So some like featured athlete of some crazy thing a human has done. So one that I did was this guy, Ross Edgley, is a British man, fitness enthusiast, and he swam around the entire island of Britain in 160 something days. And he didn't go on to land the entire time. He just was on a boat or swimming every single day for half a year. And so there's things like that that I'm very inspired by. And Obviously you can get donations for causes, and there are all these kind of things, and notoriety and eyeballs on whatever it is that you want. So if I could, bear crawl from Los Angeles to New York and then end up on, the Today Show with Al Roker, my homie, and all the people that I love on that show. That would be really cool. And I could raise, that would get towards me that, that $1 million of raise for Give Directly. And people would be like, what is this TriumphIt thing? Like, who is this crazy guy? So that's one idea of how I could make this like blow up in the next 5 years, because I would be done by 2030. So that's the diabolical idea. That'd be so painful. I don't know if it's possible to bear crawl 5 hours every day for over 500 days, but the human body is incredibly resilient. And like I said, the Nietzsche quote, I want to put that to the test. A man that has a big enough why can get through any how. And so maybe that would be my legendary stupid thing to do for being on the planet. Is I'd be known as the first man to bear crawl across the United States over 200, what was it, 2,800 something miles. So I would need, like, if I can get sponsored by Strava or something, I have like a camper van to kind of support me as I can sleep overnight. And I'm going to try to reach out to some of those, major brands, and see what happens in 2026 and kind of get the ball rolling. But like I said, Jan 1, 2027 would be the earliest I contemplate doing it. And if not, then I'll do it in 2028. But if I can get a sponsor to help kind of make this project happen, I'd be willing to at least give it a shot. Because I don't care looking like a fool if it's for a good cause. I do this other thing called burpee poker, where every week I tag celebrities in this thing to try to get them to, I'm trying to pit their influence, like their audiences, against each other in a philanthropy contest through fitness. So you draw 5 cards from a randomly shuffled deck. You have to do that many burpees in a minute. If you don't do that amount of burpees, you have to donate $1 to Give Directly. So I've been doing this like for the last 2-3 months. I'll tag everybody, like The Rock, or I'll tag all these people. No one really looks at these things on my Instagram story, and I'm just hoping one person takes me up on the challenge and spreads this thing to go viral. Kind of like the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, that type of stuff. So I'm always trying to find these unique ways to blend fitness and philanthropy and make people give a shit about it, because I think it's really important, and it's not always the easiest thing. But I'm willing to look like an absolute fool if it's for a good cause. And that's the part of me getting out of my shell and living up to that moniker of fitness and philanthropy being the most important niche that I want to have here in the world. So if that means bear crawling across the United States, or at least trying, then I'm going to give it a shot, because you don't know what you can do until you give it 100% effort. And limits are often perception issues. They're not actually a reality. And so we got to give it our best shot. So if I can get a chance to do that in the next year and a half, that would solidify the 5-year mission of this thing would be on the map, and have it in a big way by 2030. So that would be great.
Yeah, I'd say do it. I'd be in your corner cheering you on. I
Yeah,
think it's really cool.
that would be
And
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, it's really cool. Like I love that you just have all these goals and getting. I like to see people get excited about what they're doing.
Right. Right. I think that's huge.
Hmm.
Excitement, and like you said, that gives me the energy to get through everything in life, is just having the idea of how I could shape the future, to bend the future to my will, and whatever, right? Man makes plans and God laughs. So that's the way that typically goes, is, I have these grand ideas, and I've got to be open to all the different ways that this path can wind. I think making mistakes at 100 miles per hour is better than standing still. And I think that's a big life lesson I've learned as well. And this entrepreneurial journey is, you don't wait for the perfect product to ship. You just ship, and then you make it up as you go, and you adapt on the fly. You iterate, you iterate, but you can't iterate on something that doesn't exist in the world. So rather than just waiting for this perfect project or perfect idea, just get something out there. I was on another podcast, and had the frame of treating life like a rough draft. Everything you do, this is a rough draft. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Just get something out there, and it becomes better the more you iterate on something that's actually in the real world. So
I really, actually, really love that.
yeah,
Treat
especially as a
life as a rough draft.
podcaster.
Well, yeah, it really is treating it as a rough draft, because it's like the first episodes. It's like they're hard to get through, and it's like
Yeah.
you don't know the people you're talking to, and sometimes it's really nerve wracking. And
Yeah.
I can honestly say I'm not the best at. I don't edit a ton because I like the rawness, but I'll go through and take out like certain words if needed. But it's most of it's a rough draft, and then I'm just learning as I go. So
I agree. Like, look at the way Joe Rogan started. Nobody listened to Joe
yeah,
Rogan when in 2007 or something, right? 2006, whenever he started. It was just him talking to his MMA buddies, shooting the shit about fighting. And then 20 years later, he's the most famous person on the planet with podcasting. So,
yeah, he's a huge podcaster.
yeah. So it's incredible where if you just start, where this can lead.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and
that's
everybody's just it's hard to push through sometimes, but
yeah.
I think this is my passion project because I feel like I'm helping people and I'm
Hmm.
starting to get like comments back to where it's like, you know what, thank you for sharing your story or thank you for
Yeah.
having this person on. So
That's huge. Like you said, you told me before the show began, like that a little bit of feedback goes a long,
oh,
it does
wait,
go a
yeah,
long way. Because the more you just throw into the void and you get nothing back, that's the disheartening thing. I would
yeah,
rather have haters in this point in my life than there's just nobody, right? Because if you have
mm,
nobody that's looking at anything you're doing, that's the hardest thing. But if you have haters, then that at least gives you motivation to
uh,
prove somebody wrong. So
yeah,
I
yeah,
want some triumphant haters.
yeah. I've had a couple negative comments on like YouTube,
Sure.
and my brother-in-law, I was reading him some of them. He's like, you know, the funny thing is they write these negative, bad comments or mean comments to you, but all they do is help your stuff hit the algorithm
They
better.
do.
It's like, and me being me, I'm kind of sarcastic, so I go and I'll kind of write sarcastic remarks back
Okay.
sometimes.
Yes.
I know I shouldn't do that because I don't
You
want
play
that to.
into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I play into it, and I shouldn't do that because I really am a nice guy, and I don't
Right.
want to get a certain perception as a podcaster. And but
Yeah. That's hilarious. That's amazing. Yeah. There's some trolling. There's some like counter trolling to the trolling you should do. I think that's hilarious. But you can't let it go down too dark of a path either.
yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, awesome. Well, I have like two more kind of ending
Yeah,
questions here.
sure.
First, where can people find you?
Yeah, I would say the most active platform I'm on right now is Instagram. So that would be TriumphIt, TriumphIt underscore challenge on Instagram. And then my website is also triumphitchallenge.com. Same spelling, TriumphIt challenge.com. And you could see the leaderboards, you could see the upcoming challenges, you can see all the training plans I have and different things on the Instagram. You could see stuff like I said, the Mission Mondays, where I have some virtue of the week that I'm highlighting. I have the newsletter and the podcast clips that I've been on in the past. I have the Willpower Wednesday, which is now the Burpee Poker Challenge every other week. Thursdays, I want it to be somewhat of a triumphant transformation once I have more people in through the challenges and all that as well. And then Friday is the Fitness History Friday. So that's where I feature some historic athlete, some crazy human achievement, and I write a spoken word poem about it because that was a big creative outlet for me in undergrad was writing. And I think that's a good way for me to process language through the puzzle of rhyming, essentially. So I'll do a spoken word poem every week about some famous fitness freak and somebody that really changed the paradigm on what's possible. So those are the Instagram posts type of deal. And then there's some Instagram, just inspirational content as well. That's probably the best place socially to find me. My email is triumphitchallenge@gmail.com. If you have any other further questions or want to get involved or be an affiliate of any kind for the events. So next up is the Murph coming up here in a couple weeks. That's a big one. I do it pretty much every year at this point because I, again, work for the military. So it's big in this world as well. And then after that, it's the Juneteenth tribute where apparently I looked it up. This is what the average slave would walk and towards their freedom on the Underground Railroad was 10 to 20 miles every day. So for the Triumphant Challenge, I do either a 9-mile walk for Silver Division or a 19-mile walk for Gold Division. And you have to do at least a mile barefoot for each of those. So that's the Juneteenth tribute. 4th of July is a feast and a fast. So it's a kind of combination of the abundance and scarcity in America. We donate to Action Against Hunger for that. And then 911 Tower Challenge for the September 11th 911 Tower firefighters who lost their lives in that terrorist attack. And then the Veterans Day trench warfare is digging a trench and writing a letter to a veteran. So those are the 7 events. They're on the website though, so you can see those and sign up for those.
You have a lot of good stuff going.
I'm trying to stay busy. Yeah.
It sounds like you're going to stay busy.
I think I will. I think I will. I'm just adding more projects, but they're all things that I enjoy doing. So I am pretty lit up by all of it. But yeah, and I still work a 9 to 5 with the
Yeah,
military. So yeah, it's all
and
different
that's
angles.
that's where it gets hard.
Yes, how to yeah. That's the other thing is how do you make time for the hobbies that you have, right? Because I want to
Hmm.
do all these things and start businesses and build relationships, and it's tough. I don't have kids, so you have 3 kids, I have none, so that's where I get my time. Yeah.
Last thing here is there anything that we did not discuss that you'd like to bring up?
Ooh, that is a great question. That's so important. I think it's very important that you highlight that or give the guest a chance to relay that. But honestly, I mean, we touched it. You said this was going to be 40 minutes and it's, hour and 12 minutes. So we really did go over, I think, the majority of the things that I'm interested in talking about. Everything from the mental health struggles in 2020. I overcame that with a more of a community mindset with my fitness journey and purpose through the 7 charity challenges I do every year. We talked about the bear crawl across America. We talked about the spoken word poetry and the Instagram. So I mean, I think I hit it all as much as I could. I think we need to normalize the men saying "I love you" to other men. That's another big thing for the mental health and our 4 a.m. friends who you can call in the middle of the night, that kind of thing. So just normalizing those. I think go out and tell somebody you love them today. If anyone watching this is wants a challenge from the Chief Challenge Officer, Ty from TriumphIt. That's who I am. So go out and tell somebody you love them. Not fitness related, but it's a good challenge to do nonetheless for our comfort zone.
Well, thank you, Tyler, so much for being on. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Uh,
Yeah. Thanks again, Travis.
uh, yeah, not a problem. It's my pleasure. And thank you to everyone that has listened or watched. You can find us at Overcome Pod. I'll throw in all the links to the show notes. And the best thing you can do for us right now is to share our stuff, like everything, basically just pass it on so we can get everything, the podcast out there.
Yeah,
Thanks again for listening.
appreciate it.
Until next time.
Take care.